The River Severn, at 220 miles from its source in the Welsh Mountains to the Bristol Channel, is Britain's longest river. Its Latin name is Sabrina, taken from a powerful Celtic legend of a maiden who, cast into its waters, drowned and became a water nymph, the saviour of damsels in distress. In medieval times, Severn was chronicled as the second biggest commercial river in Europe. At the birth of the Industrial Revolution in Ironbridge, Shropshire, goods were floated downstream to Gloucester and the Bristol Channel in shallow barges, which included the Severn Trows. Trade rapidly increased when Brindley's Staffordshire and Worcestershire Canal joined it at Stourport in 1772, and then the Worcester and Birmingham Canal reached the river at Worcester some 40 years later. Today, commercial traffic is virtually non-existent upstream of Tewkesbury. The Severn is experiencing an annual growth in pleasure traffic by boats using the Avon and Stourport cruising rings that it creates. Our journey retraces the journey the Severn boatmen and eventually the canal boatmen made down the Severn to Gloucester, and with the building of the world's first ship canal, the journey between Gloucester and the Bristol Channel at Sharpness. With visits to Worcester, Upton-on-Severn, the National Waterways Museum at Gloucester and Sharpness, this is indeed a voyage into history. Stourport is unique. It was one of the few towns to be created by the construction of a canal. Mart Lane is lined by cottages which are now historically important, as they were built only a few years after the canal arrived. Stourport's complex of 4 basins are home to scores of privately owned boats of all sizes, built for canal, for river and for sea use. A 5th basin, filled in over 40 years ago, may eventually be re-excavated, a project that would require the funding of waterside regeneration development. A former warehouse, now the home of the local yacht club, has a clock tower which was presented to the Staffordshire and Worcestershire Canal Company by the Stourport residents. Equally historic in canal terms is the Tontine Hotel, built by the Canal Company to entertain its customers, such as boat fleet operators and merchants. Now a brewery-owned family pub, it was sold off many years ago by British Waterways predecessors. There are both broad and narrow beam locks leading to the river, and these are an indication of just how busy the basins were 200 years ago. The broad locks were the first to be built to lift the Trows and other river barges above the flood level. The 4 narrow locks are formed by 2 staircase arrangements. The fairground alongside gives this inland port a typically seaside kind of atmosphere. Today's waterside, with its well-tended grass and trees, play areas and river trip boats, is still as popular a venue for West Midland day trippers as it was in the 1950s and in the pre-war years. Apart from the towering signpost and background of trees, the view of the old riverside wall and the exit from the narrow locks has changed little in 2 centuries. Walking along the old towpath, it's difficult to appreciate the former industrial heritage of the waterside. But from the water, hundreds of yards of remains of old wharves lie silent witness to the death of a once mighty commercial river. Huge piled sheets deflect the flow of the sometimes tempestuous River Stour as it joins the Severn. On the adjoining open ground once stood Stourport Power Station, which took its coal via an aerial ropeway from a canal basin.